You're watching in... Today Global, we bring to you news about Mahatma Gandhi statue or bust vandalized in Italy by pro-Khalistani elements. The statue that you see, the visuals that you see, is that of that we're going to put out is that of the very same bust that was vandalized in Italy. It is just ahead of the G7 summit that is to take place, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to be there. And Shashank, this is not the first time that we are seeing Khalistani elements trying to make their presence felt everywhere Prime Minister Modi goes, and if there are Khalistani elements in that country, we have seen them do that, whether it's Canada, the United States of America, the UK, and now Italy.
Absolutely. This was a particularly bad situation last year. You had a string of incidents that were causing a lot of tension between India and numerous Western countries, because and you also had vandalizations of symbols that were seen as symbols of Indian culture. So, for example, temples, Indian diplomatic missions, community organizations. These were places that were consistently defaced, and also many times Hardeep Singh Nijjar himself, whose vandalism, whose name also appears in this vandalized bust of Mahatma Gandhi. Absolutely,
the graffiti that you see on the bust, there are writings on that on the statue at the bottom, and it's in black.
Right.
And it says Modi, it says Hardeep Singh Nijjar, but it's misspelled.
Right.
So
Modi's misspelled as well.
Modi's misspelled as well. So yes, there has been an incident of vandalization, but the authorities in Italy are saying that they immediately cleaned up the area. There were some reports, Shashank, that some reporters putting out that Prime Minister Modi was to inaugurate this bust, which is not the case. What we're given to understand is that the bust was already inaugurated.
Absolutely.
And it's after it was inaugurated, after a few days of that the bust was vandalized. A serious incident. And we'll just play out the reaction of the Indian government. Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra has just briefed the media regarding Prime Minister Modi's visit to Italy. Let's just listen to what he had to say about this incident.
Question relating to the vandalization of the statue of Mahatma Gandhi. We have seen the reports of that, and we have taken out up with the Italian authorities. We understand that suitable rectification has already taken place. You mentioned that this is scheduled to be unveiled by the Prime Minister. I think, Ashish, you mentioned that in your question. Well, perhaps you have a better insight into the schedule and all that, but according to our sense, according to our information, the effort to vandalize the statue, which is of course deplorable, has been addressed, and the necessary rectification has taken place.
Okay, so that was Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra. He just spoke about the entire incident, saying that they're taking it up with the Italian authorities. But Shashank, the larger picture, let's zoom out a little and say, this is not the first time that we're seeing this incident. We've seen the Indian authorities take up the matter time and again in various countries. Is this a more mobilized, planned way in which the Khalistanis have now started acting? They have an agenda. They have a plan. They know the big events that are to take place. And around that event, they ensure that anything that represents India is defaced.
Absolutely. I think that this is just a standard tactic that you use when you don't have much support, but you want to amplify the coverage that you get in the media and in the minds of the general public. Because one thing we absolutely have to understand, and this has been talked about time and time again, that the Khalistani cause does not necessarily represent in any way the views of the Sikh diaspora abroad. In fact, it's a small minority. But the problem is, if you have such minimal support, how do you maximize your sort of coverage in international and national media? And I think that Khalistani groups, understand that when they do something like this, it always gets picked up in the Indian press. It causes tensions for example, in India with many Western countries, and so on. And so I think this sort of not only gets them attention, but also gets them what they want, which is that it begins to sow doubt in the minds of many people about
Also, it
in
has
his relationship.
yes, but also it has grown in prominence in terms of how they plan things. We've been reporting about this for a while, me maybe more than you, but the fact is that I have seen this, and you also have seen this, that in the past, when we would report or these incidents would take place, they were few and far in between. But now what we're seeing is an increase of the cases, a more organized manner in which they're doing it, and also one very important point that Shashank made, which is this, that the entire Sikh community does not represent this section, but we are certainly seeing a growing manner in which they're organizing themselves. We've seen summits in the past in various countries, but not to the extent that they'd organize themselves and go and vandalize the Mahatma Gandhi statue.
And just to add to your point about things being increasingly provocative, I mean, of course, we had very recently this float in a parade being used to depict the assassination of Indira Gandhi in 1984. This is something that you have...
In a way to celebrate it.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, you had the Canadian High Commissioner coming out and saying that, no sort of violence, celebration of violence should not be condoned. So this is really just an example. And again, but if you look at, if you were looking for publicity and that was what you wanted, then you got it. Because if you were a Khalistani group looking to do something like this, it was covered wall to wall in the Indian national media. So if you're looking to enrage, if you're looking to provoke, if you're looking to gain attention, this is exactly the way to do it. So I think it's another provocative technique. I think that they knew also that with the Prime Minister set to go to Italy in just a day or two to attend the G7 meetings, that this would also dominate a lot of headlines and a lot of headspace. So I think it is very much just a PR tactic as well.
Yeah. Also, the fact that Prime Minister Modi was not going to inaugurate the bust, but Italian authorities have cleaned the area up completely. This again goes back to the whole thing of how the issue of Khalistan, Shashank, has been handled and should be handled. The fact that in the past, when we'd see these incidents, most of them, Indian authorities would say, please do not give them enough breathing room or projection or space. But in this day and age of social media and digital world, do you think that really strengthened them, has allowed them the space to mobilize more?
Right, absolutely. I think if you're a proponent of any cause, I think the social media age definitely allows you to reach more supporters, gain more attention, especially if you do outlandish things. I think that's definitely the case. But somehow I wonder, and perhaps this is just a hunch of mine, I somehow also think that just the recent controversies that have taken place about the the Indian assassinations controversy or alleged assassinations controversy with various countries like Canada and America coming out and saying that we suspect that there may have been an Indian government's involvement in carrying out what they call transnational repression by carrying out assassinations on foreign territories. I think that narrative that India has an authoritarian government, an autocratic government that is going out to suppress and to silence its critics abroad who happen to be Khalistanis, that narrative, which we've seen in a lot of the Western press, has emboldened, I think, a lot of these groups to come out and say, actually, we're not just proponents of a tainted ideology that has killed thousands of people. We're actually free speech. It's free speech. We're an oppressed minority, and so you need to pay attention to us.
That's true. A very thin line when it comes to free speech. An example, quite a few of them ask, the Indian authorities have been asking these foreign countries why certain action has not been taken against those who propagate violence, who are talking or threaten Indian diplomats, so on and so forth. To them, the Khalistanis in Canada, in the United States of America, particularly those who are putting out posters and all, are very smart. While it is an open threat, while they're trying to take on the Indian administration in a way we've never seen before, and the acts of violence and vandalizing of the flag, so on and so forth, we'll talk about that also. But some of the big banners that came up, Shashank, where they said death to, or kill, or murder, so and so, and in very fine text in the very same poster they write by ballot not bullet, or through ballot not bullet. So they just put that rider so that they don't fall in the bad side or the wrong side of the law in the country that they're residing in.
Absolutely. It's a bit like saying investments are subject to market risk by putting in really small text.
Really only fine text. So, and they do that so that the projection is this, that we dared you, but they're not actually daring India,
Right.
because they're being they are being cowards by putting that fine text and saying we are daring you by showing that big poster, but not getting into trouble with the country that they are in. With that rider.
Absolutely. And if I may point something
And
out.
in many cases, they've been doing that. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, actually, but if I may point something out, we recently had Ian Bremmer, of course, come to the India Today conclave. You can watch that video as well. And he actually pointed out how he thought...
On India Today Global.
On India Today Global. And he actually pointed out how he thought India had actually mishandled the Khalistan issue. And I think this cuts to the heart of the problem for India as well, which is that because this narrative has set in that actually this is not a dangerous ideology. It comes from, we had Charlotte Littlewood of the UK, counterterrorism expert, come in and tell us that there's a lot of ignorance in Western countries about what the Khalistan movement represents.
Yes.
It has changed a lot from the 1980s in the sense
It
that...
has.
Exactly, and they're not seen as a violent, dangerous ideology anymore. So the problem becomes that because this narrative of transnational repression has set in, when India responds and says this, it sounds shrill. Because that narrative, and so that makes people think that we've mishandled this diplomatically, and I think that's a real conundrum for the Indian government.
Also, I'll come back to this one, but I was talking about the protests and burning of the flags, so on and so forth. To many, we were speaking to a few diplomats, they said we hear it differently, because in the US, if you burn an American flag,
Right.
or if you demean, then it does not become a huge, then it's not an issue. So it is a problem when it comes to free speech. But there is an entire episode that Shashank has done on Indian intelligence agencies, the Khalistani, so on and so forth.
Right.
I'll ask Shashank to take over, and we'll come back with more details on the Khalistani issue. Right, Shashank, take over from here.
Thank you so much. So moving on, talking same about this issue as well, just to flesh out what we were talking about before, which is that in the context of the Khalistan issue, this has been something that's come up a lot over the last year. First of all, when we talk about Italy's of course been a very good relationship for India. It's a country where the Khalistan issue has actually not been as much of a deterrent to strong bilateral ties. I think you've had some trouble in countries like the United Kingdom, in countries like Australia, Canada, America, but not so much with Italy at this point in time, which is a good thing precisely because the relationship between India and Italy has improved so much over just the last 5 to 10 years. In the wake of the Augusta Westland scandals and the Italian Marines case. So the way I think that also going back to how the Foreign Secretary handled the questions about this vandalization, it was very clear that nothing was mentioned about space being given to extremist elements. So I think that the Indian government also understands that this is not this is not out of malice or it's not going to cause any misunderstanding, shall we say, between the two governments, which means that at least on the bilateral relationship, this is not going to have a very major impact. But just to conclude more generally, the point I think always is that the Indian government is going to have to figure out a way to handle these crises, because on the one hand, you have increasingly, as I was mentioning before, this narrative that that India is indulging in transnational repression, it is going after civil society activists. That is the image that a number of Khalistani groups have managed to manufacture for themselves. And I think that every time the government of India reaches out to countries and condemns this harshly, they're seen as cracking down on civil society, they're seen as shrill, they're seen as autocratic. And I think that narrative, that battle of narratives is really something that the Indian government will need to focus on, especially because when you have someone like Ian Bremmer come to India and talk to a distinguished audience and say that actually India may be losing this battle for perceptions and may have actually mishandled this whole crisis. I think that says a lot about how this is being seen outside India's borders. Indians, of course, are very united on the fact that they want to give no quarter to Khalistani groups, but the understanding that the Western world does not see this the same way as we do and has in fact changed a great deal over the last couple of years in terms of the level of understanding, which is very little, that exists about these sorts of groups, handling those differences in perception, those differences in knowledge, addressing that knowledge gap, especially with Western publics, is going to be an absolutely important thing to do. But as far as this is concerned, it does not seem like it'll spill into a major problem. It certainly doesn't seem like it'll impact bilateral relationships or the G7 in any major way, but nonetheless, just another in the latest pattern of attacks on really symbols of India on foreign soil by pro-Khalistan groups. That's all from us right now. Thank you so much for watching India Today Global. We will bring you the latest updates on these issues and of the G7 in the coming days. Thank you so much.